So hello everybody. So we are talking a lot about how technology is actually impacting our industry research and us as researchers. But it's obviously as well impacting at the same speed respondents, but as well fraudsters. I'm going to give you now a quick overview or snapshot of what we are seeing in our data when it comes to fraudsters using technology to disable our quality checks. It's not exhaustive, it cannot be, it's really a moving target, and it's meant to give you an idea on how we are looking at variables these days, what is different than it used to be in the past, and what are we looking at to see how technology is changing fraudulent behavior. Now I have two tools. Okay, so let me start with setting the scene. What has changed, or what does it make so difficult to fight fraud these days? And we see three evolving factors in the industry. On the one side, the demand for feedback has exploded. So there are just much more surveys out there. There's much more opportunity for feedback, and there's much more opportunity for fraud. And while our incentives have really not changed that much, they rather have decreased in the past years. The sheer volume makes it more appealing for fraudsters to trick our systems. On the other hand, because of the exposure that we have, people learn how our survey mechanics work. So they know what we screen. We know that yes is the right answer to our screening questions very often. They know what kind of behavior we penalize. And this kind of learning helps them to navigate and circumvent our systems. And then last but not least, we have a rapid advancement of technology that helps fraudsters to exploit the vulnerabilities in our systems. So combined with an increased demand, more exposure, more opportunities, people learning what we are looking for, and technology to actually make it really efficient to overcome our systems, this is all fueling the surge of fraud that we see in our industry. While everybody in the industry has been affected by fraud, we don't believe that this is equally distributed. We know that certain work has a higher risk to be affected by fraud. Niche audiences, for example, because we are removing a lot of legit respondents from our research, is favoring overproportionally certain behaviors, like overclicking. We see that projects that have limited accessibility, so lengthy interviews, or we still even see projects that are not allowing all types of devices, or just projects that are expecting respondents to give us a really big amount of very, very complex information. All these kind of restrictions are as well increasing the risk for fraud in our projects. And some of the markets are more particularly vulnerable to fraud because they are having higher volumes, maybe less stringent quality controls, or they are just easier to access due to language. And on our side, we have some shields to protect ourselves, but there are three fundamental pillars that our quality systems are based upon. We really look for three different type of variables mainly. These are system variables. System variables is everything around IP address, geographic information that we use to identify fraudulent behavior. And then we are having everything that is in the questionnaire, like patterns of answers in the survey itself, as well as the content of open-ended questions that we are using to determine the quality of our respondents. And we're using that as a kind of a framework, because on the one side, this is what technology is used for, to actually disable these kind of checks. So each technology that I'm going to talk about is used to disable one of these checks. On the other side, what we're looking at is what kind of other checks we can use or extend to still detect and eliminate these respondents. We are looking at 4 different types of technologies, and this is how we named them. So we're looking at generative AI, which we talk a lot about these days. We're talking about identity fraud, so-called clones, and as well as bots. They're fundamentally different in the amount of skills and the investment that you need to have to apply them. So generative AI is available at all times at literally no costs, while a bot is already a substantial investment. They can come in a separated event, but very often they're coming in a kind of combination. I'm not going to deep dive into bots. First of all, they've been around for quite a while. And truth to be told, we see them very rarely in our systems. If they are there, they are terrible. But because they are actually quite an investment to begin with, thankfully there are industries that are giving a better return of invest for such an investment, even for fraudsters. So what we really see in our systems is a mix between humans using technology, but not technology on its own. Let me start talking about AI-generated content. Generative AI, so the large language models, the pre-trained models that we see these days, can be used to fill out questionnaires, complete questionnaires. They are in our systems the most obvious when it comes to open-ended questions. They can be used at any time by every person in the room, so they are not requiring any kind of technical skills. When we're looking through our projects, we find them, and I put in here a couple of examples from a survey where we're asking for leisure time activities. What makes them really, really different is that large language models are based or are trained on text. So what does text do? Does text-trained models have 2 characteristics? A, they need to create the context in their answer. So our surveys are essentially like a conversation. We have several questions and answers from our respondents before they're normally getting to the open-ended question. So they are already creating some kind of context with us. A generative AI tool that you ask to answer a question is going to create the context within the answer. So it's much longer than we see from our generic response. The other part is that the language that is used is a different one, because if you're writing a text, you're revising, you are taking care of the vocabulary that you use. And so does an AI model that is not specifically prompted for something. You just prompt, can you please answer that question? They will use a different vocabulary than you would use in a conversation. Acquiring new knowledge or to expand interpersonal relationship is nothing what you say when you're telling somebody in the pub what your hobbies are. And these are essentially things we start looking at. A second part is that because we are talking about people using technology to answer the question, we are also thinking about how these are being transferred into our survey forms. Most of the quality systems out there are using some sort of copy and paste checks. a lot of other platforms are using copy and paste checks and are preventing them. So there are a lot of programs that are actually enabling people to use copy and paste, but just with different keybinds or with small programs inserting texts. So this is an example. Here you have, instead of Control C, Control V, you have Control P. We see that in our data as well, and we're controlling for it. So we can see Control P, we see Control S, we see a variety of new keybind combinations to be used to insert that kind of answers in our texts. So there are no system variable patterns that we use to detect those answers. We've run last year a pilot with a high-risk study on 3,000 interviews in the UK and the US. And we looked at, well, what could a possible impact look like? So who is actually affected? How does it look like? And what do our quality checks that we currently apply, how many of those fraudsters are detected by these checks? And what we see is that the impact, depending on the source, is quite different. So we see between 0% for some sources, so no issue at all, up to 32% for some of the sources. Mind you, this is a high-risk project. And what we've seen as well is that most of these fraudsters are essentially sophisticated enough or know enough about our systems to not trigger the traditional quality checks that we apply. And this makes us adding new checks to our base of checks that we currently have. We are looking for lengthy answers, so we are not just screening anymore for the very short and rubbish ones, but we are as well looking for the very perfect ones that are extremely long. We are renumerating in the meanwhile signs of being a human. So we are looking for people that are using slang, we are looking for people that are using emojis, that are having conversational tone, and we are actually flagging that as well in a positive sense. And we are actually extending our telemetry data, looking specifically for ways of how to insert text in a more sophisticated ways into our system. Identity fraud is already something a little bit that requires already a little bit of more investment, a little bit of more skill. What it does is it creates faked online personas. Most of our systems are made to eliminate duplicated response from our system. So everybody is applying some sort of digital fingerprinting, for example. So there are tools out there that are enabling people to create different accounts with specific characteristics. This is just one example. This tool actually creates digital fingerprints, IP addresses, geographic information for certain personas, and it's applying the same kind of information again and again when you're logging in. It's not meant to be it's not created for market research specifically, it's actually created for social media, where there has been a high return of investment to create big amounts of multiple accounts. And those we see now being transferred into market research and being used on our end. These are really difficult to detect. The good thing is they are very rarely used on its own. They're normally used in combination with some of the other checks. What we see, what it does is essentially that it's limiting the information that is transferred into our system. So these kind of tools are limiting, for example, the information on browsers and the in-depth information on the devices that we are using to identify them. And we start flagging this lack of information transferred already in itself. Okay? And we're looking for consistencies. These kind of tools are normally used at the very beginning of the interaction with a respondent. So it's very useful to repeat certain kind of measures again and again throughout the interaction with a respondent. For example, when it comes to the IP or the time that they are transmitting us, if you're measuring that for consistency at different times with the interaction, this is useful to look at those. And it's very rarely, as I said, it's very rarely coming at itself. So it's often used with other technology. This is enabling us better to find them. Another one is what we call clones. It's a technology that is actually helping fraudsters to fill surveys in a more efficient way. It is actually transferring the information from one page really into multiple pages at the same time, and so it's not anymore. It's like we most of the time still have the click farm pictures with the several devices pinned somewhere and somebody is clicking on each screen. It's not like this anymore. Technology enables people to actually open several online personas with the help of the multi-login tool, and then filling out surveys, transferring the information from one survey form into the other, so that you don't have to go through the survey each by each anymore. It is a video of a TikTok content creator who's actually showing people on how to use it. And it's very nice because it shows you how he's actually transferring from information that he's filling in the over left screen into several forms. It's not working for all types of questions, but it's working for a big proportion of questions. So the answers that they are going to give us are similar, but not identical. What do we look at when we are trying to detect clones? We are looking at similarities, and similarities in this case would be the timing when somebody's coming into our system, as well as certain similarities on certain questions. And we are looking again at the telemetry data, because here you are having as well certain background information that is similar but not used in the typical digital fingerprinting because it's not strong enough. Are things like our device information, like for example the size of the screen, all itself not big enough or not strong enough to use on its own, but in combination with the timings and different other patterns in the questions, it's enabling us, or it's a proxy if we're getting these kind of fraudsters in your data. Beginning of the year, we had a look on what the impact on our projects actually are, and we looked at 32 randomly selected projects, and we found in 6% of the sources we found some kind of signs for this type of technology. Again, if it's affecting your study, it's depending on what kind of risk assessment you have behind the study, but there are quite some few traces in our data for this type of technology. Today, this is really just a glimpse on what we see in the data, and it's not going to show most likely everything that is out there. But it's meant to give you an idea how our view on certain variables have changed. We are not looking for the perfect answer anymore, but we are remunerating human flaws in respondents. We are looking for not for those that have no history at all anymore, but we're looking for real respondents giving us the full information of their devices and giving us granular information on of their devices. So this is as well what we think that we need to do in the future, because so far we have tried to find the perfect respondent that is not out there anymore. We are trying to change that, to really look for signs of real humans behind the screen. And it's time to actually as well think what type of questionnaires and what type of research we need to put out there to get these real respondents into our surveys. And these rapid developments in technology is also going to lead us that we will not find that one solution for our quality issues anymore, but that we need to start looking much more granular into quality checks than we have been before. Thank you.
JT?
Question. Are you mics or not mics?
No mics, so there's one in the middle, so you can sort of...
I shall shout this way. Brilliant, thank you very much. It's great to see big companies like Ipsos being so transparent about the issues in the industry, so thank you for sharing. Clones is one that I don't think gets enough coverage. You showed a screenshot of the video, sorry you couldn't see the video. It seems to be the same survey at the same time, which is
Yes.
probably quite a unique circumstance where multiple accounts that a clone participant has access to are all taking the survey at the same time. Is this an issue mostly bigger research agencies would have, where they are sending the same survey out to a lot of similar people, or is it something a bit more pandemic than that?
Yeah. So what I shared is that the impact is not just affecting one agency. This is why I put for the impact the amount of suppliers that are impacted. So that for the first part. Secondly, you have to keep in mind that those fraudsters actually know what type of profiles we are looking after. And the shortage of certain profiles is not the issue of one agency. And because we are routing and prioritizing certain profiles over others because of this issue, and this is again, it's not Ipsos, it's not Kantar, it's not Sint or Dynata. I think this is really something that everybody in the industry is treating kind of similarly, and thus you will have the effect on all types of sources.
I have a second question. Sorry. A lot of the analysis that is required to identify the patterns that show that someone is a clone, or any of the other features really you've described here, are often run after data's been collected, after it's passed through processes and reported. As we move as an industry to more real time, what are the challenges there for capturing people in flight, if you like, during the interview?
That's an interesting question, because it's the question of what comes first, right? I think the ultimate goal for everybody is to have that real time, this kind of checks. I don't think that we have, as of now yet, a possibility, even including machine learning, we don't have a possibility to detect new patterns real time and remove them. And I think that as well, the risk that you're removing something that is not fraud based is too big for that. So yeah.
Thank you for that presentation, and excuse me if I've missed this information or this question's too simple. But you focused, you told us that subsamples and harder to reach audiences is a high proportion of fraudulent behaviour. Is that because they're just hitting everything the same, and because there are fewer humans involved, there's a higher proportion, or are they actively targeting the high CPI and higher returns that those harder to reach samples give?
They are. What we see, I mean, it's like what we see is, and this is what I meant when I said that they are trying to target niche targets. Yeah. This is a mix between the learnings that we are providing them in our systems, and obviously the higher proportion of success for a fraudster when they are actually creating profiles on that targets.
Well, and it's to do with the return they get as well, is it per survey for those harder to reach audiences?
I think it's about the volume rather than about specific incentives, with the exception maybe of business to business, where we know that there is incentive-driven aspect to it.
Can you say more about click farms? Did you do a study? We know that they're in some contexts, not others. What's your experience?
So what we see is click farms, but on a more advanced way. They are really, it's like, I think they're moving away from being what you have in your mind when you're talking about click farms, but they are technology-driven click farms in the meanwhile. And indeed, this is something that we see because out-of-country fraud, meaning are enabled by this kind of technology. They are able to create in the country personas to trick us to believe that they are in the countries we are looking at.
Just over there.
It's quite a challenge for us to collect at font scale sort of video and audio data, but have you done any experiments with that, and have there been any instances where you found that also to become the responses have been seen to be fraudulent?
I'm not too sure if I can.
So have you put video or audio questions in to validate that they're real people, and have you done any tests to find out if you're still getting that data that can be fraudulent?
Yes, we've experimented with video and with audio data. The issue is that we always need to balance on how much on how many effort we are putting into to guarantee that those are real respondents. This kind of additional check is driving legit people away. And this is a problem because obviously it's going to limit your sample in a complete different way, and it's not going to help your data quality overall. There have been ideas about that, but really the acceptance to give us particularly video content is very, very small, and we would limit our sample, and it's not going to justify it. It's not going to be justifiable over quality control, if that makes sense.
I'm going to stop with that. Thank you very much, Eva. That was really good.